Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com, previewing the 151st running of the Kentucky Derby with David Aragona of Daily Racing Form, otherwise known as DRF. You can follow him on X at David Aragona. How are we doing today, David? About a handful of days ahead of the Kentucky Derby.
Doing pretty good. It's an exciting weekend in the sport of horse racing, one that we look forward to for months since the winter time. So exciting that it's finally here.
Generally speaking, as we kind of lead into your handicapping process, we get into the morning line odds here. Again, about 5 days or so ahead of the Derby as we record here on Monday, April 28th. When you compare your general horse racing handicapping strategy versus the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs, what stands out in particular?
Well, me personally, when I go into handicapping horse races, I'm trying to look for opinions that maybe run contrary to the general public, because that's what gives me my edge. Because in horse racing, you're generally betting through a parimutuel system. So you're not betting against a house, you're betting against the other players betting their money, the other horse players. So I'm trying to look for an opinion that I think is maybe a little different than everybody else, that is going to give me more bang for my buck. And the great thing about the Kentucky Derby is that there are 20 horses. If you have a slightly different take on 5 or 6 of them, then it just makes it a really great wagering opportunity for you, much more so than a typical race on any random day of the week. So the Derby is unique in that sense, and it really makes it fun, especially for somebody like me who looks for long shots to bet. The Derby has plenty of those.
A nice tease there. We'll get to some of those in a bit. What about the draw on Saturday night and post position? How does that play a role in your handicapping?
Yeah, so post position in the Kentucky Derby, I don't think it can be underestimated. All of these horses have never been in this situation before where they're facing 19 other rivals. So when you break from that 20 horse starting gate, a poor start from anywhere in the gate is going to definitely negatively affect the chances of a horse. But there are a couple post positions that are less than ideal, more prone to trouble, breaking from number 1, which basically goes right into the rail. You want to avoid that, especially if you're a horse that doesn't have a whole lot of speed, because you've got everybody trying to come down toward that inside rail, because just a quarter mile down the stretch they're heading into a turn. You want to get as close to the rail around the turns to save ground as possible, so you're not running a longer distance. So those horses that are drawn closest to the inside have to avoid sort of getting bumped or jostled heading by the stands the first time. So drawing inside can be problematic for certain types of horses, but also, a 20 horse field going around turns, you also don't want to get caught too wide because you're running a farther distance than the other horses, so breaking to the far outside can also be a bit of a disadvantage. But like I said, you got to break cleanly, first of all, from wherever you're positioned in the starting gate.
Great insight there. And the fastest 2 minutes in sports is generally just that, race that revolves around speed and pace. Mm-hmm. But what kind of pace do you expect in this rendition of the Derby? From some prognosticators I've heard from, it's projected to be potentially a slower race, at least juxtaposed to some of the recent Derby finishes. Where are you at on the potential pace of this race?
Yeah, so when we talk about pace in horse racing, we're thinking about how the race is going to be run, how many speed horses are in the race that are going to be going out to vie for the front end and carve out the fractions. And if there are multiple speed horses pushing each other to go faster through the early part of the race, that can sometimes set things up for a horse that's further back in the pack, 15th, 16th, 17th, to pass everybody and win the race. We've seen that happen plenty of times in the Kentucky Derby with so many horses and so many potential speed horses in the race. You can see horses coming from towards the back of the pack as the front runners slow down. It's funny, leading into the Kentucky Derby this year, the conversation all through the prep races was that there weren't too many speed horses qualifying for the race. That kind of changed a little bit with the final round of preps a few weeks ago, the final horses getting into the field. There are a number of them that do have early speed, and it feels like there are about 5 or 6 horses among the 20 that are going to be trying to break from the gate and get some position towards the front of the pack. So I think there is going to be pace in the race to set it up for a horse that's trying to close at the end. But again, a lot of it is going to depend on how they start, because if a horse breaks a little slow for that first step out of the gate, sometimes you can't recover in a race like the Kentucky Derby where there's so much traffic to deal with.
When it comes to recovering, and maybe a horse that can do just that in the latter part of the race, Journalism, the favorite among morning line odds at 3-1, the only horse in the field with 3 straight graded stakes wins, including that come from behind victory at the Santa Anita Derby. So how do you expect journalism speed to translate? And then part B here, what about post position for journalism? Any impact with what we saw on Saturday night?
Yeah, so first of all, post position for this particular Derby favorite, I don't think matters so much because in terms of where he's going to be positioned in the pack, he's shown a lot of versatility in his prior races. So, I mean, he could be towards the back, he could be somewhere in the middle of the pack, and I think be just fine doing either one. The thing with journalism is he's a really strong finisher, so you know that he's going to be running on at the end. One of the unique aspects of the Kentucky Derby is that the distance is 1.25 miles, which is farther than most of these horses have ever run in their lives. And journalism, the way he's finished off all of his preparatory races, just gives you the sense that he's going to love the extra distance, probably more so than other horses. So I think that is a reason why post position doesn't matter so much for him, because you know he's going to produce that finish. And as far as his favoritism goes, I mean, he seems legitimate. In horse racing, we base a lot of our assessments of horses' talent on these things called speed figures. It's basically taking how fast horses run and standardizing that time for how fast the surface was playing that day based on any number of factors, whether there was wind or whether there was rain and the track got deeper and slow. Speed figures standardized for all those factors. And journalism has run the 2 fastest speed figures of anybody in this field when you're looking at the Beyer speed figures, which are a highly respected number that's put out by the Daily Racing Form. He's the fastest horse in the race, and he's also got that attribute where you feel like the distance is going to help him run even faster. So he seems like a pretty legitimate Kentucky Derby favorite as far as they go.
What about the jockey in Umberto Rispoli, 0-2 in his career, his best showing a 9th place finish with Endlessly last year? Does jockey history, I guess, small sample size here, but does that impact your handicapping when it comes to journalism, even though you obviously noted why you maybe favor journalism in a race like this?
Yeah, I mean, you would love for your jockey to have some experience in this particular race because, like I said, it's a unique beast. I mean, you don't typically ride against 19 other jockeys in a horse race, especially not in the United States. So, I mean, the fact that he's got that experience under his belt at least once, I mean, that's a good thing for him. But he wasn't riding a horse in the past that has the kind of talent that journalism does. And he's got plenty of experience riding this horse. He's piloted him in 4 of his 5 prior races. So he's got that rapport with the horse, which definitely matters in racing. And, you know, Rispoli, he's a good jockey. I mean, he is not always getting mounts in the top races nationally, but he wins at a high percentage where he's based out in California. So I wouldn't worry too much about potential experience there.
Last part here with journalism, it sounds like to me you expect his number to be shorter in terms of the closing number versus the morning line odds. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm a morning line maker myself. I set the morning line for races in New York at the major tracks there. I did make a line for this Derby that will be published in the Daily Racing Form. I've got journalism pegged at 5-2 odds, so 2.5-1, a little lower than the 3-1. It's tough for a horse to go off at that short a price in the Kentucky Derby because the money is so spread around, so it's hard for a favorite to get bet down too low in this particular race. But I think journalism's going to be somewhere in that range, like 2.5, 3-1.
Worth noting that the favorite hasn't won once in the last 5 Kentucky Derbies, but as David mentioned, definitely worth considering journalism, even at a short number as the favorite among the morning line odds. Another big storyline, David, in the Kentucky Derby, Bob Baffert returning following a 3-year suspension, and one of his horses, Citizen Bull, priced at 20-1 among the morning line odds, finished 4th in the Santa Anita Derby. And both of Bob Baffert's horses could be the potential pace-setting duo here in the fastest 2 minutes in sports, looking at Citizen Bull, along with the previous mentioned horse. So when it comes to Citizen Bull and Rodriguez being priced at 12-1 on the morning line, any handicapping there, any pros or cons when it comes to maybe backing one or the other in exotics or fading one or the other in some of your bets?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have Bob Baffert back at the Derby. He's a character in the sport, a polarizing figure, but definitely he adds some flavor to the race. And he always has a stable of talented horses based out in California, and he's bringing over a couple of them here. What's interesting about both Citizen Bull and Rodriguez is that they are both horses that could be involved in that early pace, vying for the front end. And I talked about how post position one can be a difficult starting gate to break from. Well, that's where Citizen Bull drew last Saturday night. I don't think Baffert or the connections were too pleased about that, because when you draw post one, you basically have no choice but to ride as hard as you possibly can to get ahead of everybody else and not encounter traffic heading into that turn. And Citizen Bull does have a lot of early speed. He likes to race on the front end. I think the concern with him is the distance of the race, because he got really tired at the end of his final prep race, which is the longest he had tried before, and that was still an eighth of a mile shorter than the Kentucky Derby. So I think they were hoping to maybe take a hold of him and ride less aggressively in this race, but now he's drawn in post one, so I think that it takes that option away. They've got to just go to the front end and see if he can last the distance. Rodriguez, you could probably have a little more confidence that he's going to go further than Citizen Bull. He can get the distance. He's just going to find himself, like a lot of these horses, in a situation where he's got a lot of other horses around him that are going to be vying for the same position that he wants towards the front of the pack. So it's going to make it difficult for him to work out his preferred trip during the race. But he's a horse with talent, and I'm not going to be surprised when he's effective here. He's just going to need some others to not be handled so aggressively in the early part of the race.
Back to the top of the morning line with Sandman and Sovereignty. Second and third best odds on the morning line for the Kentucky Derby, 5 and 6 to 1, respectively, at posts 17 and 18. So both of these horses, when we talk about when it comes to Bob Baffert and maybe trying to get ahead of the pack, both of these seemingly looking to come from the back of the pack and well off of the pace. What do you make of their draw ahead of the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally for horses like that, they're going to drop towards the back of the pack and just sort of get into their rhythm and do their best running in the second half of the race. Post position matters a little bit less. So while typically drawing way on the outside wouldn't be ideal for a lot of horses, for these two, Sandman and Sovereignty, I don't think it matters so much. They're probably going to be the slowest out of the gate or among the slowest. Drop towards the back, try to save some ground on the turns, and then hope that the front runners tire themselves out and they can pass them in the second half of the race. The big concern for both Sandman and Sovereignty is just negotiating inevitable traffic, because when you've got a large clump of 20 horses and some are tiring in front of you, you've got to pick your way through the pack. Going back to watch Kentucky Derbies past, like the ideal trip from last to first is the one that Rich Strike worked out in 2022 at a huge price, where his jockey just made all the right moves coming through holes and picking the right place to be on the racetrack to avoid tiring foes. But more often than not, when you're trying to make that move from last to first, you encounter some traffic along the way and get your momentum stops. So these two just have to hope that they don't fall into that trap.
You mentioned Rich Strike, I believe closed right around 80 to 1 or exactly at that price. And when we think about long shots for this rendition of the Derby, at post 19, there's Chunk of Gold, a 30 to 1 long shot. The jockey for Chunk of Gold, Junior Alvarado, and the trainer Ethan West, who's just 32 years old and I believe got his trainer's license just 7 years ago, which is pretty astonishing. But Chunk of Gold with a pair of second place finishes at the Louisiana Derby and the Rising Star Stakes. Where does Chunk of Gold rank for you among potential long shot picks?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said earlier, I like to find some horses in a race like the Kentucky Derby that are maybe going to fly under the radar a little bit and be higher odds than what I think their actual chances of winning are. So for me, 30 to 1 on Chunk of Gold is a perfect example of that. I mean, I think he's on a short list of horses that is moving forward at the right time and is going to appreciate the circumstances he's going to face in the Kentucky Derby for a couple of reasons. You mentioned the two prep races that he participated in, the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby. He lost both of them. He was second each time, but I thought he had some things go wrong for him in each race. He encountered some traffic when he was trying to make his run from off the pace in the Risen Star, so I would upgrade his second place finish a little bit. And then the Louisiana Derby, kind of like what we could expect to see in the Kentucky Derby, was a race where the leaders went really fast towards the front end, and his jockey that day tried to place him a little closer to the pace, I think, to avoid the traffic that befell him in the prior race, but it sort of backfired because the front runners tired themselves out. He took the lead briefly briefly, but then the horses that were sitting towards the back of the pack kind of swallowed everybody up at the end. But he still held on for second, even despite that. So I think he's a horse that hasn't had circumstances in his favor, but the jockeys kind of learned how to ride him along the way. And he's another one where he's got such versatility to where he can be placed early that I'm not so worried about him drawing so far outside in post 19. And like I said, he's going to be a big price. He's not on a lot of people's short list for those that they want to wager in this race. And I think he's going to be a good value play in here.
Another potential value bet for the Derby, Final Gambit, which is a popular pick among some sharper handicappers that I've paid attention to this week, including yourself and the infamous Hall of Famer Brad Cox being the trainer. So Final Gambit at 30-1, 2 straight wins. And according to some handicappers that I've had a chance to tune into, has the running style to also adapt to conditions at Churchill Downs. So making for a intriguing long shot, certainly. And you look at some of the buyer speed figures, 88, 90, and 90 in its last 3 races. So a lot of consistency there that I already outlined for you, the reasons why you are fancying Final Gambit's chances this week. Or what else makes you intrigued by this horse?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the points you made about the potential price for this horse, whereas I think Chunk of Gold is going to be every bit of that 30-1 that he is on the morning line. Maybe this horse gets bet down a little bit. The pari-mutuel odds, I mean, they will move from the morning line when people actually start betting their money. And this one seems like it's a little bit more of a popular pick among those in the long shot bracket. But yeah, what you said about the pace, I think, is the salient point with him. I mean, if they're moving fast up front, you want to look for some horses you can work into your wagers that are going to be sort of picking up the pieces at the end when everyone else is getting tired. And Final Gambit is that kind of horse where they're just going to take back, ride him from somewhere 18th, 19th, 20th early, and just try to pass as many horses as possible. I mean, the big wild card with him is the dirt surface that they run the Kentucky Derby over, because he's done his best racing on a synthetic surface at a couple tracks in the United States. They have implemented a system of rubbers that the horses run over. It's a safer surface for them, so it's nice to see. But he's really run well over those synthetic dirt surfaces, not actual dirt. So it's going to be a slightly different situation for him to encounter in the Kentucky Derby. But he's another one, kind of like Chunk of Gold, where I feel like he's been improving through the prep races and does have the potential to take another step forward in the Derby.
Looking at the Japanese base horses here to wrap it up before we recap your favorite straight bets and maybe an exotic that you may be looking to place later in the week. So you have Admire Daytona at 30-1 and Luxor Cafe at 15-1 next to one another at post 6 and 7. How do you evaluate either in a positive or negative sense?
Yeah, so I mean, Japan has been bringing more and more horses to the Kentucky Derby recently, just as an international racing circuit. Japan's horses have been really becoming more talented over the past couple of decades. So it's interesting that they're traveling around the world now to conquer these major races in other countries. And they almost got it done last year with a horse named Forever Young, who just barely lost the Kentucky Derby in a 3-horse photo finish. Now, I don't know if Admire Daytona or Luxor Cafe are quite as talented into this Derby as Forever Young looked last year, but Luxor Cafe, particularly of the two, has shown a lot of talent in his races over in Japan. He's clearly way better than the competition he's been facing over there. He's been impressive when you watch his races. He's just going to be facing unfamiliar circumstances, coming to a new country, facing a field of 3-year-olds that are better than he's met previously, and having to overcome all that travel in doing so. But I think this horse has talent, and the main point with him is he's not attracting quite as much buzz coming into the race as Forever Young was last year. So he's probably going to be around twice the price that horse was, somewhere in the 12 to 15-1 range. So I don't think that's a bad price on that particular Japanese contender.
Recapping your favorite straight bets here, going back to journalism, Luxor Cafe, potentially, maybe get ahead of that number, it sounds like, especially if it could close in the 12-1 range versus 15-1 on the morning line. Final Gambit, maybe another horse to get ahead of, and then Chunk of Gold, again, it sounded like could close in that 30-1 range, similar to the price that it is right now. So maybe 2 to wait on and 2 to bet versus come closer to Saturday.
Yeah, so when I'm making my straight bets, like a win bet on the Kentucky Derby, I typically try to restrict it to the one or two horses that I think are the very best value in the race. And for that, you kind of have to wait to see how the odds move when wagering opens, on Friday and Saturday. You're going to know pretty early where the odds are settling and how much they're going to be differing from the morning line. But like I said, I'm expecting to get a pretty big price on Chunk of Gold. So I'm pretty confident to make a straight bet on him and then maybe fool around with the others in some exotic wagers, particularly journalism, who, while I think he is the most likely winner, I'm not looking to make a straight bet on a horse that's that short a price in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, last 5 derbies, no favorite has won. So worth noting there for sure. He is David Aragona. You could follow him on X at David Aragona of the Daily Race Inform, otherwise known as DRF. Really appreciate the time, David, handicapping the Kentucky Derby. Anything that you would like to promote, again, as we're about 5 days ahead of the fastest 2 minutes in sports.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to learn more about how to handicap these races or just start with the Kentucky Derby, head on over to drf.com. We've got a lot of handicapping data there. You can check out some packages specifically around the Kentucky Derby. So just make sure to check out our website. You can follow me also on X. My handle is at Horse to Watch. If you want to check out my insights on the Kentucky Derby or follow any other horse races I'm covering in the future.
Really appreciate your time today, David. And as we close out here on Beat the Closing Number, thanks to everyone who watched and listened to this edition of our handicap of the Kentucky Derby. Be sure to check out thelines.com for the latest information on the 151st Kentucky Derby. And you can find all of our free contests on the Derby over at play.thelines.com. So for David and for myself, Eli Hershkovich, good luck with your Kentucky Derby picks.